A teenager has succumbed to injuries sustained at a workplace at a sawmill. So this is one example of what happens when you roll back child labor laws. So now, according to the Florence County Sheriff's Office, a 16-year-old boy had died last week from on-the-job injuries sustained while working at Florence Hardwoods, a sawmill in northern Wisconsin. So we don't know really the details of what happened. I'm assuming it's because this is a minor, but again, the boy who has not been identified because, once again, he's a minor, died from his injuries on Saturday of last week. So this is happening during a push by Republicans to, of course, roll back laws against, regulating child labor. And as The Guardian notes, Wisconsin is one of 14 states across the country that have introduced more proposals to continue to roll back labor protections. One of the most recent ones being Arkansas, who allows teens under the age of 16 to work without having to get a permit through the Arkansas Department of Labor. That state also no longer has to verify the age of those under 16 before they take a job. And Wisconsin had actually passed a similar law back in 2017 that apparently did not get a lot of attention. That law allows 16 and 17-year-olds to no longer need parental consent before obtaining employment. And employers would not be required to furnish information to the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development regarding the 16 and 17-year-old working conditions, hours of work, etc., before the minor can begin working. So once again, we are in the middle of a massive rollback of child labor laws, which is going to inevitably lead to far more of these types of injuries and deaths. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is heavy. Where do you even begin? It's we, growing up, I used to remember conversations about how we were so proud of the fact that, this country used to be so backwards. Kids used to be working, in the coal mines, and we reversed that. We gave workers weekends, and now to see us go back when we've come so far and go back so quickly, rather, it is very, very overwhelming, to say the least, because, the most defenseless people in our society are kids, are minors, right? And they're used as, a political cudgel of sorts when it comes to LGBTQ rights. Think of the kids, in other instances, so for these protections specifically that are there for them to be rolled back, it is very, very nefarious. And I think that one humorous element of the story is, I can't remember which governor did it, but there was this juxtaposition of two photographs of two different governors. One of them was Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas, and there were the kids around her as she signed the child labor law, or the bill that rolled back protections with regard to child labor, and the kids just looked not very enthused. And then there was another governor who had signed a universal free school lunch program, and they all were hugging him and were very happy. That
might have been Governor Pritzker of Illinois.
Okay, I was thinking either him or Tony Evers, but I'm not 100% sure.
Evers could have been,
one of them. But it just.
I'm pretty sure my audience would. It's my audience says that you are correct. It's Evers.
It is Evers.
Oh, and there's actually Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is another one. That might have been the person in the picture that you're referring to. But but no, they're very. You're correct to bring up that juxtaposition, and I think that's really, really interesting that you bring up that point, because again, doing something to help the children, to actually help the children, versus people who claim to want to help the children and protect the children, doing things that are to the opposite of that. And that's what you have pretty much with all these different issues. You mentioned LGBTQ plus issues, and that's also a great example, because claiming, we have to ban drag shows to protect the children. We have to ban critical race theory to protect the children. We have to ban, any mentions of LGBTQ people in school, to protect the children. Whereas they're actually not protecting children. They're for one, harming trans children, and let's not forget that, trans and non-binary, and they're also harming cis children. So many different stories that I've seen, of right wingers that are targeting cis girls and claiming that they're trans to try to, I don't know, bully them, keep them out of sports, or they're just mad that their little snowflake lost. Their special little child lost. Oh, my baby couldn't lose. It must be a man.
Yeah,
Disgusting.
That's a really important point, about the stories, that they don't care about protecting kids,
Exactly.
because they are willing to, sacrifice kids to the gods of capitalism in order
Right.
to increase corporate profits. And all of these changes are happening within a broader context of diminishing worker rights for adults, right? I mean, we haven't had the minimum wage raised at the national level since 2009. And so think about why this is happening currently. Why would we suddenly bring back these child labor laws, or rollback protections, I should say, just to be clear? Right. Obviously, it is because rather than, giving adult workers a living wage, let's hire kids instead. They're going to be happy with $7 an hour. That it's easier to just reintroduce children back into the workforce than to actually address the worker rights issues that they refuse to address. So that context cannot be lost on all of us. It is deeply late stage capitalist in its very nature. And if this doesn't tell you that capitalism is absolutely psychotic, then I don't know what other story. Well, actually, there are plenty of other stories, but it's like one of the best examples. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I was definitely hoping that you were going to bring up the capitalist point. If not you, then I would have, absolutely, because look, it's a great example. I remember during the pandemic, nobody wants to work. Even afterwards, nobody wants to work. No, it's not that nobody wants to work, is that no one could afford to, work and actually live on what you were paying them. And that's been the issue all along. So instead of actually going, you know what, I could take a little bit of hit from my corporate profits, which are still massive, thanks to greedflation that's going on. Okay, let's give them a little bit of a raise. Let's raise that standard of living a little bit here and help out our workers from above. No. Instead, they took their money and they paid politicians through lobbyists and campaign contributions, and they said, we want children to work for us. You see, some of them, and I like to make this joke, and it's a bit of a dark, my sense of dark humor, but they just heard of Minecraft and they're like, oh, the kids, they must yearn for the mines. We'll send them to the mines.
Yes.
No, let's not do that, because this is what happens. People end up getting injured and they die. And by the way, there's another angle to this as well. And that's how a lot of migrant labor is being used. Migrant child labor is being used, for example, in meatpacking plants and, in places like Kentucky, Tennessee, these places where they have rolled back these labor protections and now have taken, I think, most likely undocumented migrant laborers who are children and put them in these conditions where they are, in slaughter rooms, seeing things that no one should ever have to see. When they're, 12, 14 years old, 16, things like that, putting them in these terrible conditions, having them work with chemicals, dangerous chemicals. And this is what's happening in this country. And they don't want to protect the children. The right does not want to protect the children because this is what they want to do with the children. They want to send them back to work.
Yeah. Preying on.
Sorry, let me just add one more quick thing. It's also why they hate education for children.
Right. Absolutely. Preying on vulnerable people who don't necessarily know any better. It's so much easier, right? I worked when I was 16. As soon as I turned 16, I worked. I had no idea that the law required me as a minor to take breaks. Never took breaks.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Adults, they know, right? But they exploit labor where they can get away with it, right? It's not just migrant labor where they have to work under low wages or the threat of like being removed from the country
Yep.
when they've made their lives here, which is despicable. But then it's also a slave labor from prisoners, right? Rather than just doing the bare minimum to increase living standards for workers currently, they exploit the most vulnerable people, which just shows you how sick and twisted this system is. And the most important thing that I want to leave people with is that this is all a choice. This is a policy choice. The fact that this is happening and not being corrected is something we are choosing to allow. We're choosing to allow slaves to do this work, children, migrants, and it's sickening. But I mean, this isn't necessarily an unintended consequence in late stage capitalism. I mean, when the goal is only maximizing profits and you have to increase profits each year, otherwise your shareholders are going to be mad at you when you constantly got to raise the bar. You cut corners, you cut labor. Labor is the biggest expense for them. So if they can exploit, they're going to do that, and they can, so they do.
And not only do they cut labor expense, but they also cut safety expense. And so you have child labor and you have an even more unsafe workplace, all, of course, for corporate profits. And I think the most disgusting thing is how openly celebratory they are of it. How they think that, no, they're out there saying, this is a wonderful thing. Yes, putting your children to work, that's going to help them so much. It's going to build them so much character. You see, we just want them to develop that moral character so they don't end up being like lazy people from like millennials and Gen Z. You know those lazy slackers.
It's so
we don't want that.
dystopian.
No, the people who are millennials and Gen Z, a lot of us are very much aware that we're being exploited by corporate America, and we're the ones that have been, especially Gen Z, in the unionization efforts all over the country, have been the ones that have been fighting back the hardest. And they want to, the right wing and the corporate overlords, the owner donors, they're the ones that want to fight back and prevent that in the next generation going forward. Because you got to remember, conservatives always seem to be one step ahead, planning far, far into the future for their victories. And we really have to work harder to head that off.
Yeah, well said.